Preface. The purpose of this paper is to discuss several topics on the UAP issue and explore several aspects of the phenomenon. This ethereal abstraction of technological wonder transcends humanity's innovative spirit and leads to a philosophical thought game. Just what could we do with such incredible technology? Could we create a tenable utopia? Or perhaps the perfect apocalypse? How would the world transition with these technologies, and how would the world deal with the implications attached to UAP? I would like to make clear that I do not believe in the dark forest theory. The idea of malevolent aliens hiding in the shadows is not something I am concerned with, and more so concerned with humanity as a whole. What would humanity do with such technology as we are now? Thousands of years of human history points to a culture of war, territory, power consolidation, and having the greater edge in the technological arms race. How does understanding our history of conflict help in understanding our future? What would disclosing these technologies to the world bring to the geopolitical sphere? How will the economic systems of various nations be affected by the dissemination of these technologies? Can a nation legally lay claim to these technologies depending on how the original technology was acquired? Would a public-private partnership be an effective way of bringing these technologies to the American public? How will our enemies utilize these technologies that are now known to the world? The issue is shown to intertwine with various sectors of modern human existence, as well as take the stage as the object on the altar of belief. Physicists, economists, national security personnel, philosophers, historians, and any profession that deals with the human condition will be felt by the ethereal hand of this subject. I implore any and all readers to consider this from their perspective, just as I explore it from my own limited worldview and experiences. But I believe tackling this unknown, this lighting of the dark forest, is central to humanity benefiting from UAP disclosure and all it will entail. I would like to make this point very early on. Under no circumstances will any government body release such sensitive information if it will leave them in a position of vulnerability. Geopolitics stops for nobody, and it is a point I don't see people talking about enough. The brutal reality is, there is no incentive to put a nation in an unfavorable position and unleash a chimera of issues with potential proportions unlike the world has ever seen. That said, that doesn't mean it should remain in the dark forever. I explore ways for disclosure to happen in a way that doesn't leave said government in an immediate vulnerable position. I implore all who read this to consider this aspect when pushing for disclosure. The spider's web is more intricate than what the light may show. Finally, I strongly believe the human race must analyze the systems that we preside in order to achieve a prosperous and better world. Once we understand and accept our history, I believe the greatest mission of not just the United States, but all the nations of the world, is to learn to overcome our lesser nature and incentivize means of using these technologies to mutually benefit mankind. We must graduate from this phase in our existence and move forward to a broader, more unified world by laying the groundwork now. I am by no means an expert or someone who claims to have all the answers. The entire purpose of this paper is to encourage discussion and help spread awareness on the topic of UAPs and what their implications could mean. I give special thanks to the late Brigadier General Billy Mitchell for his courageous and innovative spirit and for laying the groundwork of some of the possible ideas discussed. I give thanks to the United States Air Force and the brave men and women who make up General Mitchell's spirit of breaking barriers. I give thanks to David Grush for encapsulating what it means to live in the American spirit of truth, justice, and exceptionalism. I give thanks to the men and women who have come forth on their testimonies in regards to the UAP phenomenon. I give thanks to my late father and to my grandparents and their development of who I am today. And most importantly, I am deeply honored that you, dearest reader, are dedicating your time to exploring what is perhaps the greatest multi-layered challenge in the history of humankind. UAP and ontological shock. Stagnant the air, unmoving yet the leaves filled with mysterious tremblings dripped the streams. From coal-blackened fountains, effigies of gods, rude, scarcely fashioned from fallen trunk, held the mid-space. And, pallid with decay, their rotting shapes struck terror. Thus do men dread most, the God unknown. Lucan Pharsalia. Merriam-Webster defines ontology as a branch of metaphysics concerned with the nature and relations of being. This is emphasized as a particular relation to the nature of our existence. The foundations of human culture have intimate ties with ideas and means of being. Throughout civilization, there was a line of reasoning for humans to follow, things that are tangible and give people a purpose. The advent of science and the pursuit of understanding the wonders of our world has given us the gifts of medicine, physics, biology, neurology, technology, and even a glimpse into the cosmos. The United States government defines UAP as unidentified anomalous phenomenon. The idea of UAPs has been accepted by different facets of the American government as a real and credible subject that should be looked at under the realm of science. This has sparked a great curiosity for the budding scientists to focus on a new frontier, to pioneer research into the subject. The classification of information has made it difficult to accurately represent the subject matter in full force. To conduct study on UAPs without access to data within your own government is a waste of money and time that could be made more efficient if operating together. However, the classification of information has also served as a cauldron of sorts, bubbling and brewing in a darkened shed in the woods. What happens when the witch is away and you finally open the door? UAP is an iceberg topic to a far deeper issue. The all-encompassing question people ask is, what is behind these UAPs? The UAPDA legislation defines NHI as any sentient, intelligent, non-human life form, regardless of nature or ultimate origin, that may be presumed responsible for unidentified anomalous phenomena, or of which the federal government has become aware. To look to the stars and ponder the possibilities of life forms existing in the universe is exciting. To be confronted with the reality they could already be here and actively a part of our world is another thing entirely. The Trojan horse question of what lies behind UAPs can be broken down into ontological tiers. But before going into detail, I'll give a historical example, for these questions have been asked by the American public before. During the 50s and 60s, UFO pop culture was already exploring this. A comic published in 1962 called There Are Martians Among Us tells a tale of a man who discovers a crashed UFO. His wife is kidnapped, and that ends with the twist that the man was the Martian all along. The fear that there might be alien enemies in our midst resonates with fears of Soviets and communists from the McCarthy era. Ultimately, in this story, the humans are the ones who accost and capture the alien woman. The shift in perspective puts the humans in the position of the monsters. The Roswell incident, decades of alien movies, Orson Welles' fake alien broadcast have also instilled a sense of terror and wonder in the public mind. Then, in 2021, the Department of Defense released 3 UAP videos with no announcement as to the purpose or their stance on the videos. Footage widely considered a hoax and known about since at least 2017 was now confirmed as a real phenomenon worthy of being released to the public. 4 days after writing this paper, NASA made an announcement of bringing UAPs into the realm of scientific discourse. The 2023 UAPDA legislation has legal terminology on the subject, some examples being terms for legacy programs, non-human intelligence, and UAP. Ontological tiers. I define ontological tiers as a series of broad questions that follow each phase of disclosure. The first tier, or the Y tier. Who or what is flying in U.S. airspace? Is it foreign adversaries? How did they acquire this technology, and what are their intentions? Can the United States defend against such technology? Does the United States possess such technology? How did the original technologies get acquired? Can we trust what our own government is telling us? This tier deals with acknowledging and laying the groundwork. The science tier. How can such technologies fundamentally change our understanding of science? Who are these NHI? Are they interplanetary, extraplanetary, or interdimensional? How many groups are there? What does their presence say about our understanding of existence? What will people who have interacted with these beings say about them, and who should we believe? What groups will form around the confirmation of their existence? What does this mean for religious beliefs, or our current modern beliefs? What is our purpose in relation to them? What is their culture and way of life, and does it redefine my own? The security tier is, are they abducting people, and if so, why? Are they conducting experiments on us against our will? What effect will this information have on the mental health of the average person? Are they always present and we cannot see them? What does this mean for privacy and autonomy? Are they friend or foe? Does our voice matter in their interactions with us? The socioeconomic tier. Will the disruption of our world be for the better? Can humanity reach a new technological apex with or without these NHI? Will we be at war with them or will we be allies? Will our focus have to change and align to something resembling these NHI in order to maintain contact? Do we have a choice? Should we have a choice? If consciousness exists after death, does the NHI have a hand in where we go? Do we go to the same place? What is this place? And what does that imply where we are? The potential tier. Will we live among these NHI or will these NHI live among us openly if they aren't already? Will humanity learn to be extraplanetary or even interdimensionally? What will such conditions do for our economy or perception of value? The disclosure of such sensitive information is understandably delicate. Once the genie is out of the bottle, predicting how the people will react is something that cannot be fully understood. Strategic, coordinated effort to release information to the public is a far better means of information transfer than careless admission. The confirmation of UAP and its implications will arouse certain primal responses: excitement, fear, call to action to protect or demand more information. Certain demographics may form their own groups around a certain worship of these things. I believe the strategy to control the flow of ontological tiers will better mitigate the impact of the other questions to the general public. I am of the camp that believes the American people have a legal and moral right to know the true nature of things. How this information is framed will be key to what follows. Simulated responses and war games on how certain demographics respond will leave the United States better equipped to deal with the tiers of ontological shock. I believe the basis of a lot of ontological shock, at first, will be an inquisitive response. The coming physicality of such evidence pointing to another way of reality will spark wonder in many, but the lack of understanding will make the public uneasy. The dissipation of the Y tier being mixed in with the other tiers would be a viable way to plant the seed of eventual return of the topic once the frame of questions places more focus on the other four tiers. That is because the philosophical implications will be present in all facets of this process. I have the highest faith in our government to be able to frame disclosure of UAPs in a way that does not lead to panic, but to one of a unified force that leads into wanting to be part of this new era of wonder. The idea that we are not alone and beings that can actively communicate with humanity will go down in history as the greatest step into the next age of human existence, the phase of entering a renaissance of possibilities that could potentially shape our lives and the lives of our descendants forever. Make no mistake, the philosophical implications of this could very well alter the systems of human interaction. To prepare for the journey to change is the mission. But to hide this from the world reminds me of a classic tale. A dog lay in a manger, and by his growling and snapping prevented the oxen from eating the hay which had been placed for them. "What a selfish dog," said one of them to his companions. "He cannot eat the hay himself, and yet refuses to allow those to eat who can." On UAP and national security. In matters of national security, emotion is no substitute for intelligence, nor rigidity for prudence. To act coolly, intelligently, and prudently in perilous circumstances is the test of a man, and also a nation. Adlai Stevenson II. There was a time when America was the only country in possession of the atomic bomb. Then, in 1949, the Soviet Union detonated their first atomic bomb and shot the world into the Cold War. At its pinnacle, there was a time where many thought the world would end. There are a few theories as to why the world didn't end. Many attribute it to luck. The B-59 submarine was primed with a 10-kiloton nuclear torpedo and was given permission to launch at U.S. forces. Captain Valentin Savinsky was quoted as saying, "We're going to blast them now. We will die, but we will sink them all. We will not become the shame of the fleet." 3 officers were on board, and all 3 had to agree to launch. But a brave man named Vasily Arkhipov, who is now hailed as saving the world for his efforts, calmed the captain down. The world turns today because of Vasily Arkhipov. If there isn't a UAP reverse engineering arms race happening now, there certainly will be if this technology is released. Indeed, some even claim UAPs had a hand in turning off nuclear sites during the Cold War. Within times where there is a threat of annihilation, there will always be people or perhaps objects like UAP who will find ways to avert destruction. This is a very particular situation that I call the Arkhipov effect. It takes the very real threat of destruction to push certain people out in their small day-to-day lives to avert complete destruction on a planetary scale. I could think of several reasons as to why I would want UAP fully declassified, but from a national security point of view, I cannot think of a single one. At least, not at first. Information released could be thrown to tens of thousands of engineers in China, while here we remain limited on bodies and give China a head start. If there is already a reverse engineering program underway and we somehow get full disclosure, then America has shown their hand and our enemies can feel confident knowing where we stand, while they remain hidden without impunity in their own governments. It would be incredibly foolish to simply release these technologies to the public without some kind of means of disseminating select tech, as mentioned in Chapter 4. It would be pointless, ineffective, and dangerous to be the only country releasing this information. This is the paradox of the security ontological tier. The first country to reveal these in detail would need assurances that these will not be used as weapons of war. You could reveal the revelation of NHI to the world, but that doesn't mean reverse-engineered technologies should be on the table right away, unless there were assurances. Treaties involving the nations of the world describing the purposes of use of this information would need to be guaranteed. It was never really about a single nation coming out. The implications would mean the world would need to agree to use these technologies with purposes not having to do with war. Of course, this is not an immediately realistic goal as discussed in Chapter 5c. The path laid forward will be the path that is paved by smart disclosure. Remember, we must consider the global reaction to such information while treading on this. Human beings tend to do foolish and dangerous things while in an emotional state, so it's imperative that the information is released with the strategy in mind. That means an end goal with detailed methods of achievement. Of course, nobody can truly predict what will happen. But as Gustave Le Bon once said, the crowd is a force of nature one can only conduct. The previous points are probably common lines of thinking when assuming disclosure from a national security POV. However, I believe the wonderful men and women within the American government should also not forget to view disclosure from a different frame of reference. Disclosure will have to come with the acceptance that the world will require to change with this information. Such technologies that could thrust humanity into an unprecedented jump in progress would certainly have the potential for destabilizing the globe. The ontological tier would be handled by nations individually, but there would be a rather glaring call to action in order to unite as nations under this strange new world. Unification, from what I can see, is the only practical end goal from disclosure that paves the path for a better tomorrow. A potentially cosmic conscious world where nations must look not to the stars but to the people on Earth and ways to finally unite so we may all benefit from these gifts. The idea of war, which I explore in subchapter 5c, is a very real threat we must accept, understand, and learn from, lest we see our own apocalypse. This is probably the greatest factor in withholding disclosure from the world. But this is an opportunity to learn and grow. There is no need to disclose things hastily. Destabilizing entire cultures and religions with the potential ramifications of what these non-human intelligence represent can be mitigated by proper framing. Even in the most tame of cases, the public will demand answers. The framing of the answers with the objective of uniting the people under this message will be essential to implementing technologies into infrastructure. It is easy to look starry-eyed at the concept of zero-sum energy or anti-gravity propulsion, but the fact of the matter is these technologies would prove more harmful than positive without the right mind. Such intricate technology requires immense trust and self-control, and its true potential can only be realized through a desire to provide for all. The idea of nations are necessary evils, and with a call to unity, perhaps we can identify as both American and Earth citizen. On UAPs being prosaic attribution. According to Chris Mellon, there are allegedly 50 to 100 monthly reports of UAP encounters by American military personnel. As of today, there isn't a reliable center of data for sightings around the world that aren't tied to American military bases. This would lead to a skew in the data points and not be accurate to how many actual sightings happen around the world on a daily basis. The UAPDA legislation defines prosaic attribution as having a human, either foreign or domestic origin, and operating according to current, proven, and generally understood scientific and engineering principles and established laws of nature and not attributable to non-human intelligence. If it is another foreign country behind this, it makes sense not to make this directly aware to the public and to the enemy in question. It would spell a host of questions. If it's China, where did their technological boom come from and why was it so quiet? There could be a joint effort with Russia and China, as evidenced by their military operations over the years with testing in Russia's vast and isolated landmass. Russia has produced many notable scientists in the 19th and 20th centuries, but many scientists had left to work in Western Europe or the United States as early as the 90s. However, it's worth discussing that within the 20th century, Russian and Soviet scientists were among the best in the world in regards to physics, not to mention their high proficiency in the space sector. As early as 1922, the first scientist to propose an expanding universe model was named Alexander Friedmann, whose pioneering work known as the Friedmann equations were greatly profound to the field of cosmology. The theory of the alpha decay of a nucleus via tunneling and author of the Big Bang Theory, Georgy Gamow, laid the groundwork for how we scientifically perceive the universe to this day. Dmitry Ivanenko pioneered the proton-neutron model of atomic nuclei and the nuclear shell model. Nikolai Bogoliubov introduced the triplet quark model, introducing a new quantum property known as color charge for quarks, and formulated a microscopic theory of superconductivity. Lev Landau made significant contributions to various areas of theoretical physics, earning the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1962. Nikolai Basov and Alexander Prokhorov co-invented lasers and masers, receiving the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1964. Igor Tamm, Andrei Sakharov, and Lev Artsimovich developed the tokamak concept for controlled nuclear fusion and created its inaugural prototype, laying the foundation for the modern ITER project. Yevgeny Zavorsky discovered electron paramagnetic resonance, a pivotal technique in the study of chemical species. Jorez Alferov played a pivotal role in the advancement of modern heterostructure physics and electronics, with applications ranging from CD and DVD players to fiber optic transceivers. In 2010, two Russian-born and educated physicists, Konstantin Novoselov and Andrei Geim, were honored with the Nobel Prize in Physics for their groundbreaking work on graphene, a material with promising applications in electronics, aviation, and medicine. It should be of note that it is not outside the realm of possibility that there are groundbreaking technologies being created by adversaries and are testing the limits of dominating our airspace. Disclosure of this fact may probe a premature war the U.S. is not ready to fight yet for whatever reason. There may be a technological arms race happening between the U.S., China, Russia, and other countries, and the first to reveal their hand loses. I do not rule out the possibility of prosaic attribution, but in this next section, I must argue why I believe such a thing is unlikely, while also examining the factionalism happening within the American government on the UAP issue. On Billy Mitchell, Air Warfare Factionalism and the Parallels of Today. The United States has been the world's pioneers in airspace technology and warfare since the Civil War. To quote William Sherman's Air Warfare, military aviation had begun in the United States early in the Civil War, when federal forces used captive balloons for observation. During the war, balloons were under the control, at one time or another, of the topographic engineers of the Army, the quartermaster, the Corps of Engineers, and for one day at least, the Signal Corps. Brig General Billy Mitchell presented the argument that there should be a separate branch for aviation warfare as early as 1919, but was quickly shot down and never invited to speak on the subject again. Mitchell's subordination to General Menowar, an infantry officer, is often viewed as analogous to the subordination of military aviation to operations on the ground, a view that Mitchell and others, including Sherman, were beginning to challenge. Billy Mitchell has been given the honorary title as Father of the Air Force, and despite being dismissed in his time, his efforts pioneered the breaking of barriers in air superiority and has proven true to this day. No nation has been able to match America's Air Force, and have yet to see evidence any nation has developed technology that could even the playing field without the U.S. knowing. The detonation of factionalism is telling and rhymes an eerily similar echo within the American government presently. Sherman argued that the organizational structure determined how doctrine was defined and thus would set the groundwork for how training was conducted. The disclosure of UAP technology would have the same effect. A control of what is being said would define a new doctrine as to what UAP entails, and therefore protocols for utilizing these technologies would spawn in ways that would favor whatever faction takes the reins on this topic. Billy Mitchell argued that there should be a separate military division dedicated to air warfare and to function with the Navy and Army as three subordinate branches under a certain Ministry of Defense, an idea that was contested in General Mitchell's time. General Mitchell wrote a paper on the Signal Corps with divisional cavalry and notes on wireless telegraphy, searchlights, and military ballooning. Mostly, this was a standard description of Signal Corps activities and equipment, but the inclusion of ballooning was significant. Young Signal Corps officers of the time had to study these new technologies and the military potential of balloons and dirigibles in reconnaissance, transportation, and even strategic operations was just emerging. In his paper, Mitchell concluded that conflicts, no doubt, will be carried on in the future in the air, on the surface of the earth and water, and under the earth and water. These words were the first expression of ideas he would later apply to heavier-than-air craft. As a pioneer in air warfare, General Mitchell challenged the Navy to showcase how a superior air force could suppress a naval fleet. After testing on an acquired German battleship, which was interestingly determined to have already been sinking prior to bombing, the General Board sought for a separate airborne division. Chief of Naval Operations, William Benson, dissolved Naval Aeronautics in 1919 until a certain Assistant Secretary of the Navy reinstated it. His name was Franklin D. Roosevelt. General Mitchell spared no punches against the War Department and the Navy against their lack of vision. While the two departments were apprehensive on the potential for aviation technologies, General Mitchell was already ordering aircraft to fight forest fires and guard borders. He encouraged pilots to break aviation records and encouraged the transcontinental air race where aircraft flew around the perimeter of the United States. His attack on the War Department and the Navy was an attempt to control the use of aerial technologies and therefore create new doctrine through the yet-to-be-realized Air Force and thus have full say in how training and operations were functioned. This was seen as an attack by some in the Navy. Mitchell continued his crusade as he argued that money spent on dreadnoughts was money that could be used to invest and fund this Air Force. Several hundred aircraft fighters would be far more economical, efficient, and effective than a single battleship. While I cannot find evidence that Mitchell claimed superior air power would make naval fleets obsolete, he did boldly claim to the Navy that they could sink ships under war conditions, and to prove it during an actual demonstration. The plans for the upcoming tests included a strict information embargo until all data had undergone thorough analysis. Only after this analysis would the official news report be made public. Mitchell had a strong suspicion that the Navy intended to conceal the findings. A week before the tests were scheduled to commence, the Chief of the Air Corps sought to have Mitchell removed from his position due to Navy objections regarding Mitchell's critical remarks. However, Secretary of War John W. Weeks decided to retract his support for Mitchell's dismissal when it became evident that Mitchell enjoyed broad support from both the public and the media. I cannot help but observe the UAP topic has seen an eerily similar replication of this history. Factions within our military withholding information from one another as a means of controlling UAP doctrine and thus writing the training and operations procedure of how these technologies will be used. To reveal such precious information reveals alarm for attack and the risk of losing that opportunity. David Grush's congressional hearing blew the lid open on the topic to countless individuals and forced our own government to acknowledge the existence of UAP. It can be obvious why not disclosing would prove advantageous to those with such technologies. But to operate without oversight is antithetical to what a functioning military is defined as. Without oversight, there is greater risk of illegal activities that would benefit a small minority of special interest groups. It shouldn't take the potential of NHI to smell the smoke from the fire brewing in the basement of the Department of Defense. American air superiority has always been world-class, and I find it hard to believe our adversaries have suddenly made a technological breakthrough through organic means. A common phrase in the Air Force is breaking barriers since birth. It is in their heritage. Billy Mitchell was the first barrier breaker. It was the intention of Billy Mitchell to see through this new effort. Indeed, an argument could be had with the separation of space defense interests from the Air Force as being a new model of utilizing UAP technologies, which I go into more detail in Chapter 5. The bombing tests produced a series of rapid and tumultuous consequences. Shortly after the tests, both the Navy and President Harding were deeply angered by what seemed to be a display of naval vulnerability. This frustration arose just after President Harding had extended invitations on July 10th for other naval powers to convene in Washington to discuss the reduction of naval armaments. Furthermore, statements from proponents of disarmament in Congress, such as Senator William Borah, who argued for the obsolescence of battleships, added to the official unease. In an attempt to mitigate the impact of the results, both the Navy and the Army sought to counter Mitchell's claims by relying on reports from the Joint Board and General Pershing, which aimed to dismiss his assertions and keep his report under wraps. However, the report eventually found its way to the press, leading to even greater scrutiny and public attention. The UAP topic has firmly rooted itself into the public sphere. Budget oversight and reports of first-hand witnesses have led to things such as the Schumer bill, which at time of writing this has not yet passed. I argue that our members of Congress should be briefed on UAP and its military uses as a means of honestly assessing the budget in good faith. The DoD may be building a dreadnought when other branches of the military could find ways to make more efficient, effective uses of these technologies, just as Mitchell was pioneering aircraft use for both warfare and unconventional means, such as fighting forest fires and patrolling borders. The only way to maximize the use of these technologies is to disclose them to the greater military and to private contractors with the opportunity to bring this to the market. Public-private partnership of UAP technologies. Creating a symbiotic, more mutualistic public-private innovation ecosystem thus requires new methods, metrics, and indicators to evaluate public investments and their results. Without the right tools for evaluating investments, governments have a hard time knowing when they are merely operating in existing spaces and when they are making things happen that would not have happened otherwise. The result: investments that are too narrow, constrained by the prevailing path-dependent techno-economic paradigm. A better way of evaluating a given investment would be to consider the different types of spillovers, including the creation of new skills and capabilities, and whether it led to the creation of new technologies, sectors, and markets. Mariana Mazzucato, The Entrepreneurial State, Debunking Public versus Private Sector Myths. Ontological shock and national security are not the only concerns of disclosure. Releasing this information to the public also has a series of socio-economic issues and is just as tangled. How disruptive will these technologies be in industry? Would these technologies be open source, or are they under the patent of the United States? Under what circumstances does the United States hold the legal right to sit on certain technologies and not release its existence to the public? Will these technologies be ITAR and EAR compliant, and if so, does that mean we cannot share with foreign nationals? There are thousands of scientists in the world who would relish the chance to lay privy to such wonders, but what institutions do they serve? What will groups such as the CCP, the Kremlin, North Korea, or independent private companies do with such technologies? There remains a very gaping issue. Releasing this to the world means there will no longer be oversight. Chapter 6 discusses ways the United States could approach this through global agreements and working together among nations to create global technologies that fall under a different jurisdiction. The economic implications of disclosure point to untold speculative potential that will likely spawn entire industries. The disruptive nature of technology has increased every few years, and such alleged technologies. The very model of how these industries are built can be made to either serve the human race or remain trapped in the limiting modules that serve a select few. On people won't care, they have bills to pay. Out of all the perspectives on this topic, this particular one has always struck me as bizarre. While it is important to state that the general public will react in different ways, to say that the overwhelming general public will not care about UAP is simply short-sighted. The means of framing disclosure will continue the flow of ontological tiers, and the public will probably fragment into separate ideas on the issue. While the world will not immediately be shaken by such information, the looming sunrise of what UAP could do for the world will be historical. The effects on geopolitics that such technology exists will disrupt the world. The question is, how quickly and suddenly? Disclosure framing will be imperative on this front in particular. Countries will demand more information and access to these technologies. Private contractors could be able to freely spread this technology to other nations, assuming such laws don't fall under EAR compliance, as explored in Chapter 4D. The industry that will come out of this, as of writing this, is unprecedented. Sure, aerospace engineering will have its time in the sun, but the dark forest obfuscates more than what lives next to us. Within the next 5 to 10 years, I have no doubt such technologies will dramatically alter the world. Supply chain and information flow could see a hyper-efficient tightening as better means of traveling goods and data are developed from these technologies. Faster vehicles with more efficient and cheaper or even a non-existent fuel source would overtake other slower, more expensive means of travel. A custom-built anti-gravity supership that can fly over water at great speeds with no means of fuel is certainly more appealing than ships or planes. They would probably not outright replace ships and planes, but there would certainly mean there are less ships and planes. There is also the logistics of managing such a vehicle, which can be an industry of itself. Supplemented with AI tools to assist project managers of various levels, the world will see less workers and more consumers. This brings a precarious situation. Should UBI compensation be considered further? The displacement of the workforce is a coming crisis that should be addressed sooner rather than later, and I believe some of the effects can be circumvented through a well-structured VAT plan that focuses on UAP-related tech to distribute funds to ease the sudden lack of workers through some kind of UBI system. But this is merely an opinion. I would like to see more economic minds than I discuss this problem. My hypothesis, of course, being that production will see an all-time high, but having the byproduct of sustaining a sizable amount of able bodies in a jobless limbo. The idea of jobs and work may be revisited as a question of being, but I wouldn't expect work to go away outright. There will come a time when the world is so automated that there will simply be not enough jobs for people, and will call into question what humanity perceives as value creation. It opens the door to conversation that transcends the current idea of capitalism and allows it to be a stepping stone for something more. Capitalism is designed to produce capital, but what good is capital if it doesn't aim to serve all of humanity? The bills people have to pay now will become more dire as time goes on. With the speed that technology has changed the world in just 30 years alone, I have no doubt this will become a major economic driving point in the topic of our future political candidates. Indeed, it is impossible to escape the philosophical implications from any tangible aspect of the world. If you release these technologies, what would the intent of use be? What gives an individual the sovereign right to dictate how this technology is used as opposed to releasing it with a strategy to use it in a global capacity? It's inevitable the technology will be released. The United States, if the allegations are true, are already working with private contractors to research and create new ways to use these technologies. The United States government has created some of the world's most innovative technologies: ARPANET, what we call the Internet, GPS, computers, nuclear energy, Siri, etc. And all of them were technologies disseminated through private contractors. Steve Jobs built the iPhone with the technologies of the United States military. Nuclear energy was a byproduct of the development of weapons. The Internet and computers as we know it is a hallmark in the United States' involvement in technological dissemination. As stated by economist Mariana Mazzucato, the state cannot and should not bow down easily to interest groups who approach it to seek handouts, rents, and unnecessary privileges like tax cuts. It should seek instead for those interest groups to work dynamically with it in its search for growth and technological change. It's historically acceptable to say that through military technologies, new industry spawned through other uses through the lens of capitalism and consumer benefit. The R&D heavy lifting done by the United States opens the door for the private sector to bring to market the technologies we enjoy today. However, one cannot help but wonder about the high potential for collusion. This is especially concerning when it is in regards to technologies not known by anybody else. A case can be made for hiding the potential for technologies that could have saved lives or fundamentally made the world a better place for the selfish interests of a few. At first, this raises a very poignant question. Should a technology with such high potential for destruction be left in the hands of a few with no oversight? The same question can be asked for releasing said technology. Should a technology with such high potential for destruction be released to the world at large? The question, while valid, is more rhetorical than practical. If such technology already exists, then it isn't a fear-based question of should, but a productive and strategic question of how. UAP as intellectual property, the public domain open source argument. The rules of public domain and copyright are a rife sea of grays. This subsection of this paper will probably be the most volatile and speculative as it requires many questions to be asked. I will divide this subsection around several possible scenarios and explore them briefly. I believe this side of the argument of UAPs will be incredibly important the day the data is disclosed. I will quote how UAPDA legislation defines certain technological claims. Instantaneous acceleration absent apparent inertia. Hypersonic velocity absent a thermal signature and sonic shockwave. Transmedium, such as space to ground and air to undersea travel. Positive lift contrary to known aerodynamic principles. Multispectral signature control. Physical or invasive biological effects to close observers and the environment. If true, I would not be surprised if even more technologies are available that simply haven't been disclosed yet. Sponsored Projects defines public domain and open source as follows. Public domain is a work whose intellectual property rights, copyright, patent, trademark, have either expired or never existed. This is different than export controls meanings. For example, a piece of software can be copyright, not in the public domain from an IP perspective, but published and generally accessible in the public domain from an export control perspective. Open source isn't public domain in the IP sense because it typically has an owner who provides it, often free, under a license that grants a wide range of rights and obligations to the user. But it can be in the public domain from the export control perspective. We will revisit this topic shortly in this chapter. Was this technology developed organically? According to technology.nasa.gov, NASA has a technology transfer program that released thousands of technologies to the public with the intended purpose being developed for exploration and discovery are broadly available to the public, maximizing the benefit to the nation. NASA has 15 patent sections available to explore, ranging from robotics, propulsion, optics, sensors, to medicine and biotech. Such technologies, however, were developed in conjunction with private companies who compete with each other for contracts to develop said technologies. This brings to question the contractional argument of UAP technology. If it is a technology developed through R&D funding by a government program and brought to life by a private company, it should for all intents and purposes fall under the public sector domain to be released. After all, most of the R&D and funding came from NASA. By all rights, they possess these patents. If a DoD program and Lockheed Martin had a similar relationship, it would follow suit that the rights to any of these UAP technologies fall under the DoD. Even if these technologies come off-world from an advanced civilization, a case could be made that the technologies developed by it are under the public domain of the government branch who funded the PPP. But it delves deeper into a more tangled question. ITAR compliance, the NPT Treaty, and regulation of UAP technologies. ITAR compliance is defined as compliance with the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, ITAR, which controls the export and import of defense-related articles and services on the United States Munitions List, USML. This means that all manufacturers, exporters, and brokers of defense articles, defense services, or related technical data must be ITAR compliant. ITAR compliance applies to various domains of weaponry, missiles, nuclear-related controls which falls under the Department of Energy, up-to-date and end-to-end encryption to protect ITAR-compliant data, and technologies that are explicitly stated to not be disclosed to foreign nationals. This further is explored through EAR compliance, which under the Department of Commerce handles commercial uses that may have military applications. Despite the different lakes they dip their toes in, they meet at the same river. Both laws are designed to control access to specific types of technology and data to prevent the unintended disclosure or transfer of sensitive information to an unauthorized or suspicious foreign national. Interestingly enough, spacecraft fall under ITAR compliance. NASA withholds certain information about rockets out of obligation to ITAR. Weapons could be constructed from in-depth information on any aerospace technology by nations who may seek to upgrade their missile efficacy. All vendors and entities in the supply chain must be ITAR compliant, as well as EAR compliant if they utilize commercial usage. If claims of radiation are true, the Department of Energy will likely have full jurisdiction over UAP technology. Anything created from it that is not nuclear would thus be disseminated between the Department of State or Department of Commerce. In the off chance such technologies lie outside the legal definitions of ITAR or EAR, it would fall under FDA, USDA, or some other government entity. However, I find that situation to be unlikely. The implications of nuclear technology in UAPs and the development of weapons or military craft could arguably defy the NPT Treaty. The NPT Treaty, also known as the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, agree never to acquire nuclear weapons, and the NPT nuclear weapons states in exchange agree to share the benefits of peaceful nuclear technology and to pursue nuclear disarmament aimed at the ultimate elimination of their nuclear arsenals. I believe the NPT sets the standard for UAP technology disclosure. While there is never a guarantee anyone will comply, the same can be said about nuclear weapons. Once one is launched, the enemy will launch theirs and the world will end. If everyone was armed both literally and physically, there would be little reason to attack another nation when the world would retaliate back in full force and cause unprecedented destruction. ITAR compliance requires a technology control plan, something not too dissimilar to present-day classification of UAP materials, but where it differs is designation of select people to ensure information is reasonably compartmentalized and follows a well-structured method of security only kept hidden from non-US citizens. This means that only U.S. citizens selected as empowered officers, which is defined as responsible to meet the conditions set forth in the ITAR for this position, and in many small companies the ITAR empowered official is also responsible for the company trade compliance program, have responsibilities ensuring ITAR compliant data is distributed among the proper channels, vetted and overseen, and training of any and all employees in standard operating procedure. But what happens if UAP is made publicly available to researchers around the world? Publicly available information is generally exempt from export controls, although there are distinctions in how the ITAR and EAR handle this exemption. Both regulations agree that information accessible to the public should not be subject to export controls, but diverge in the means of making information publicly available. Furthermore, the ITAR employs the term in the public domain, while the EAR uses publicly available information. Under the ITAR, publicly available information that is published and widely accessible to the public is exempt from control as ITAR technical data. For further clarification on the definitions of published and generally accessible or available to the public, please refer to ITAR paragraph 120.11. In summary, the disclosure of these technologies being comparable to nuclear weapons in both a metaphorical and legal sense of the word would require it to have proper compliance as well as new treaties that echoed the same sentiments of the NPT Treaty. The Atomic Energy Act of 1954. The Atomic Energy Act of 1954, AEA, a landmark piece of legislation in the United States, plays a pivotal role in governing the development, regulation, and control of nuclear energy and nuclear materials. Over the years, the AEA has undergone amendments, with the Energy Policy Act of 2005 being the most significant. Though we could see UAP being included in a future legislation, in fact, I would presume such technologies are already present under the AEA and being kept classified. Just as the nuclear bomb may be kept classified, but nuclear fusion is not, the fields of science related to the original UAP technologies could be studied in good faith without immediately disclosing what has already been made. The primary purpose of the Atomic Energy Act is twofold: to promote the peaceful use of atomic energy and to ensure national security. It establishes the legal framework for the development, control, and regulation of atomic energy and nuclear materials. The AEA gave birth to the United States Atomic Energy Commission, AEC, later replaced by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, in 1974. The NRC shoulders the responsibility of regulating civilian uses of nuclear materials, ensuring nuclear safety, and safeguarding the public and the environment from radiation hazards. Classified intelligence agencies work in conjunction with agencies responsible for nuclear safeguards, such as the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, to monitor and verify compliance with nuclear non-proliferation agreements. This collaboration helps ensure that nuclear materials and technologies are not diverted for illicit purposes, and classified intelligence may be used to assess compliance and detect potential violations. But the overclassification of such materials proves worthless if you have neither the manpower, brainpower, nor direction to take these technologies. The AEA places a strong emphasis on preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons and materials to other nations or non-state actors. It provides measures for safeguarding and controlling nuclear materials to prevent their misuse for military purposes. The AEA supports research and development endeavors in the field of atomic energy, encompassing both civilian and national security applications. It fosters innovation and advancements in nuclear technology while prioritizing safety and security. I believe the general sentiments of the AEA echoes into the UAP sphere beyond just classification of nuclear materials. To ensure compliance, the AEA incorporates provisions for enforcement and penalties for violations of its regulations. Violators may face fines, imprisonment, or other penalties commensurate with the severity of the violation. The AEA enables the United States to enter into international agreements related to nuclear cooperation, non-proliferation, and arms control. It provides the legal framework for the implementation and enforcement of these agreements. The AEA underscores the importance of transparency and public access to information concerning nuclear facilities, activities, and safety measures. It actively encourages public involvement in nuclear regulatory processes and decisions. The Atomic Energy Act of 1954 serves as a cornerstone of nuclear energy regulation and control in the United States. It skillfully balances the promotion of peaceful uses of nuclear energy with vital national security, safety, and non-proliferation objectives. By establishing a comprehensive framework for the safe and responsible use of nuclear materials and technology, it again lays the foundation for what proper UAP technology dissemination can look like. Historically, the AEA continues to play a crucial role in shaping the nation's approach to atomic energy and its global implications. If UAP technology is made public in some fashion, it would surely be under strict regulation. Was this technology developed from NHI technology? New legislation would follow if this was the scenario. The United States technically has rights and claims. After all, they acquired it. However, the means of acquisition and the nature of such a thing begs a grander question. Hiding this information for strategic benefit when it has potential for greatly improving the lives of not just Americans but the civilians of the world would call into question the moral reprehension of such a thing. Indeed, I would go so far as to personally call this a crime against humanity. Just as the Outer Space Treaty dictates no nation can own the moon, outer space, or any celestial bodies, I believe the same can be made from alien technologies that have come from it. If claims of radiation are involved, then utilizing NHI-based nuclear technologies violates the NPT treaty. Transparency from the Department of Energy to confirm without a reasonable doubt these technologies aren't being used for more advanced uses of nuclear power for warfare would be required. An argument could also be made akin to the law of the sea, in which UAP technologies recovered in territories give sovereignty over said technologies as it is in territorial waters. But even then, the law of the sea is international public law. It would take a global treaty to enforce transparency of any and all acquired NHI-based technologies to an official force, a topic I explore in Chapter 5. Make no mistake when I say this. Withholding information of not just highly advanced technology, but a fundamental aspect of nature is nothing short of evil. With disclosure comes an expectation to change interest to a more global focus. Disclosure of NHI to the public needs to be strategically set up to where it unites and sets up the potential for a better, new world, as opposed to needlessly scaring the public. Ownership of analysis of NHI and its technologies would present outrage, so disclosure would mean a begrudging willingness to share data. This information needs to be carefully separated from whatever the United States learned, but I believe this should be a call to action spearheaded by the United States to take a seat at the table and lead as part of a new global initiative instead of being known as the obfuscators of humanity's potential. I argue this would save face for some of the secrecy and it would put America in a better light on the global world, holding its hand out for other nations to unite. The American image of a warmongering nation of corporate despots can begin to shed. America can set the standard for innovative leadership and write the template for global defense and security that would inevitably lead to what would perhaps be the greatest feat in human history, the creation of an interplanetary defense initiative. On the concept of an interplanetary defense initiative. Yet need it be so? Cannot swords be turned to plowshares? Can we and all nations not live in peace? In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside, universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war? Ronald Reagan, 1987. In what is probably the most ambitious idea in this work, I cannot help but ponder the different ways disclosure takes us, and it always leads me back to a unified global force. A force that both represents humanity and transcends nations into a singular, focused force that dedicates humanity's potential to defense, global intelligence, resource acquisition, space economic development, and scientific research. Nations uniting for the betterment of humankind's development. Is it not war and barbarism, but human ingenuity that is the cause of great suffering? Is it not divine providence and luck, but human ingenuity that is the creation of wondrous abundance? Idle hands of our own creativity have allowed the children to play foolish games, unaware of what lies beyond the playground. It is time to put our potential to the test, for there is no greater challenge to face than the cosmic frontier. Greater still, the dark forest houses unseen forces that watch on with silent eyes. How will you proceed? The United States Space Force, laying the groundwork. The U.S. Space Force, or USSF, defines itself as is a military service that organizes, trains, and equips military members and civilians to protect U.S. and allied interests in space and provide space capabilities to the joint force. USSF responsibilities include developing Guardians, acquiring military space systems, maturing the military doctrine for space power, and organizing space forces to present to our combatant commands. While many believe the USSF was only a recent invention, its conception goes as far back as 1954, not even a decade after the Air Force was founded. Billy Mitchell's innovative foresight makes up the heart and soul of the Air Force, and it spared no effort on exploring the possibilities. The parallels of General Mitchell's argument for aerial warfare and the ponderance of satellites and ballistic missiles led to the Air Force to absorb several organizations and create the Air Force Space Command in 1982. In 2019, President Donald Trump signed the 2020 NDAA to approve the creation of the USSF, and the groundwork was finally coming to fruition. The Department of Defense created the greatest proxy to utilize UAP technologies for national defense. The USSF functions primarily as space-based operations that work to jointly assist the other branches from a top-down approach. With the aid of UAP technologies, communications and space-based warfare against geospatial intelligence of foreign adversaries would be a first priority. The first space-based military to lead this frontier leads the space frontier warfare, and to this end, I can understand why the DoD may want to not divulge all of their technologies. But the USSF has the potential to be a leader in space-based defense, not just national, but global. As of writing this, the USSF is the only independent space force in the world. This gives them the great responsibility that William Sherman argued: writing the doctrine, defining the standard operating procedures, and innovating technologies to overwhelm present known technologies. As the world becomes more globalized, national identity remains strong and rightfully so. But if UAP gives implication to other civilizations in our universe, there can be no other way to engage with them than from a united front. The human race has free agency over its life and has a right to choose how it proceeds to conduct itself in this dark forest. A percentage of military personnel from each member nation could be required to make up this Interplanetary Defense Initiative, or IDI, as I will refer to it throughout this discussion. This could come with transparency of UAP technologies and macro-scale defense maneuvers to both protect and strengthen global defenses. Just like how Billy Mitchell used aircraft to fight forest fires, perhaps we could use UAP technologies to begin cleaning up the LEO scrapyard that currently plagues our atmosphere, or have a global intelligence network that utilizes Earth system modeling to get better atmospheric or weather data. Space warfare is the race to control the invulnerable high ground. The first nation to master space warfare will have a serious advantage over any and all strategic relations of intelligence and reconnaissance. Through space-based infrared and global acoustic monitoring systems, which listen for low-frequency vibrations in the atmosphere, the doors open to possibilities through security. Overseeing the pioneering of space to colonize livable habitats could and should fall in the domain of an IDI. Such an organization could be used to intercept and destroy cartel shipments, to aid an individual nation's coast guard for a rescue mission by providing intel or backup, national disaster monitoring, recovering lost vehicles, or tracking meteors through a global interface to all nations involved. This proposition may seem antithetical for those worrying about leaking technologies or data to foreign adversaries who have access to an IDI, but such ideas should be questioned. It is fine to have a national identity, but to hold back humanity just to get the edge over other nations is a child's game, for there is no telling what lies in the dark forest. NATO, space security, and piercing the transnational veil. NATO's deterrence and defense rely heavily on space as it forms the foundation for several critical functions. NATO's ability to track and navigate forces, maintain robust communication networks, detect missile launches, and ensure effective command and control all hinge on space assets. Notably, over half of the active satellites orbiting Earth are either owned by NATO member countries or are operated by companies within their territories. Much like how Air Force Space Command evolved into the USSF, I believe something similar can and should result in the case of building an IDI. Leaders from various nations' space programs would have an opportunity to serve in this IDI for the sake of not just defense, but research and technology sharing. International law enforcing individual nations to use these technologies for war should be met with heavy sanctions, denial of entry in the IDI, and sullied relations with the rest of the globe. Man versus man should evolve to man versus world, and eventually man versus space. The USSF and NATO have understood the importance of space for a wide range of national security tasks and global military operations. However, the evolving use of space and rapid technological advancements also brings a slew of considerations, the weaponization of space being the most pressing manner. There is the LEO scrapyard that is becoming more of a serious issue with each launch. Satellites face the risks of hacking, jamming, or becoming targets for anti-satellite weapons, all of which could disrupt communications and hinder the alliance's operational capabilities. The same can be said for Russia and China. This waltz of disruption and jamming serves the same kind of process that two children on a playground share, being the first to play in the sandpit over the other by throwing sand at one another. For an IDI to work, one thing is certain. One nation mastering space-based infrastructure is a victory for all nations. It is naive to assume human affairs and interests between nations will vanish overnight. A unified doctrine meant to serve humanity, but history between nations is crucial to understanding first and foremost. At the time of writing this, tension between China and the West continues to grow, and the war in Ukraine continues. To ignore the historical complexities of what brought us here today would be disingenuous. The United States is in a position where they can lead the way to IDI doctrine, but first let us explore something fundamental to human history, the idea of war. The idea of war, understanding the past to conquer the future. The essence of war is a violent struggle between two hostile, independent, and irreconcilable wills, each trying to impose itself on the other. War is fundamentally an interactive social process. United States Marine Corps, warfighting. Human history is peppered with untold violence, inquisitions, genocide, rape, domination, and brutality. Tim Marshall once said, "All great nations spend peacetime preparing for the day war breaks out." It is a very real and active part of our history. Human ingenuity has spawned some of the most depraved methods of torture and murder, and as a byproduct, pioneered some of the greatest feats in science. Biology, technology, and modern medicine are just a few branches of science to have had a progressive pull behind the barbarity of humankind. I mention these facts not because I believe humans shall remain barbarous monsters, but to learn and defeat this impulse we inflict upon each other and aim it toward a new target. But we must learn from one another not just so we can understand our differences, but so we can understand our similarities and what binds nations into conflict with one another to this very day. Geopolitics does not stand still for anything, even the existential nature of UAP. I truly believe that even if Jesus, Krishna, and the Buddha descended from the heavens, their presence would be used to secure national sovereignty over other nations. At the time of writing this, Israel has entered war with Hamas forces, and several hundred innocents have died at the hands of historically rooted conflict. Understanding the history of nations and the conflict that shaped us is key to understanding where to take the future. To understand each other's history is a macro scale in understanding our Earth brothers and sisters, and to understand how to begin diffusing historical hatred that has been rooted in our species. I can see two scenarios happening. If the NPT treaty is something to take heed of, reverse engineering programs will reach a technological apex, and governments will find other ways to utilize the technologies. Scenario 2 infers that not enough significant progress has been made and requires more eyes, which would be the least favorable situation for any nation. I believe the pathway to take with UAP technologies is to attach a technological sharing treaty with the intent of benefiting mankind. An IDI would be the prime tester and utilize these technologies. War on man can be turned to what I call a war on the stars policy, a multi-pronged effort to branch out from Earth into the stars to mine asteroids, more serious efforts of effective space-based solar energy, testing of AI-driven space drones to assist in clearing LEO litter and data collection, and space travel or colonization efforts. With a percentage of military spending of each nation of the IDI being used for these efforts, as well as the expertise brought into such a program, it would set the stage for humanity's divided geopolitics to fizzle into more unified cosmopolitics. Space has the high potential to become a realm of anarchy, where maintaining order and security is of paramount concern. Nations competing for sections of space presents itself an absurd dilemma. The complexity of territorial claims in space is made more difficult by the three-dimensional nature of the interstellar phenomenon. Disagreements arising over the expansion of celestial bodies is a conflict of no rational quarrel. The idea of nations staking claims in space or on interstellar bodies quickly creates innumerable situations where resources, manpower, and time would be wasted to secure an open environment that is constantly in motion from cosmic forces. It's understandable that nations would want to utilize the resources of space for the betterment of their country, but an IDI would enforce the laws. Protecting valuable assets within space necessitates careful consideration of various factors, such as equipping space stations with proper technology, establishing robust resupply systems, ensuring adequate security measures, and providing logistical support. Decisions regarding the number of personnel to be sent, the need for military escorts, and the establishment of effective communication systems would be crucial in this endeavor. Space operations present unique challenges that vary depending on the specific local environments within the vast cosmos. Exploring the concept of self-sufficient and potentially self-replicating spacecraft and bases that do not rely heavily on Earth's resources sparks discussion on sustainability and resource management in space. Additionally, it is imperative to emphasize why engaging in deep space warfare should be avoided at all costs, as the consequences would be catastrophic for all involved parties. Comparing space operations to maritime and aerial combat highlights the unpredictability and challenges inherent in space travel and warfare. Issues such as repairs, rescues, provisioning, voyage times, sufficient technology, reliable crews, a strong chain of command, adequate training, and other protocols must all be carefully considered. To effectively operate in space, a strong emphasis on communication, supply chains, strategically located bases, and travel strategy is paramount. The role of the supply corps and naval vessels in managing finances and addressing potential crises cannot be overstated, as space missions are inherently costly and unforgiving of mistakes. Considering space stations with self-replicating smaller stations designed to specific needs introduces efficiency into space operations. With proper automation, it would aid with a lot of the mundane work that would cause boredom among what I can only speculate as being routine overload. These operations must contend with monotony, routine, and the psychological effects of long-term space living. Hybrid forces, combining both automated and human components, offer advantages in terms of resource efficiency and autonomy. However, the challenge lies in ensuring that the automated elements can effectively lead and complement the human component while avoiding bottlenecks caused by the slowest component in the chain. The human body is already facing serious long-term effects of being in space. Human forces will probably remain close to Earth while automated forces scout for intel and resources and report back. Supply lines will need to be considered under extreme circumstances. Unless there was a need to go to war, the main reason to travel would be for economic reasons first. This includes space colonization. I cannot think of any reason to colonize any part of the cosmos if there wasn't some economic tie to the mother planet and with advances in space mining. Considering the rapid deployment of a global stability security force similar to the structure of an air force in space underscores the importance of readiness and preparedness. As countries like India continue to advance their space capabilities, global competition in space necessitates a strategic outlook and proactive measures to maintain international stability and security in the cosmos. NATO's 2022 strategic concept echoes the concerns allies have previously voiced regarding the growing threats in space. It underscores that strategic competitors and potential adversaries are investing in technologies that could restrict our access and freedom to operate in space, degrade our space capabilities, target our civilian and military infrastructure, impair our defense, and harm our security. It makes little sense to me to continue having the resources of several nations disfigure each other's efforts instead of pooling resources and talent. A war on the stars policy should offer tantalizing trade deals to better incentivize nations to cooperate. Research of a nation would be in service to humanity, not just the nation. For in the end, all should benefit from these technologies. The sooner we can funnel the transnational political stage into a more unified effort, the better. This is probably the greatest challenge we face as a species, and to remain in this state of thinking will surely be our downfall. The space economy. According to Cornell University, researchers predict that the space industry will grow significantly in the coming decade to include not only support for telecommunications, research, and security satellites, but also a new space economy in support of individuals visiting outer space as tourists and passengers. Select technology that can cause great utility to humankind and create new industries, as explored in more detail in Chapter 5, but there wouldn't realistically be a need to release all the information unless there were treaties in place that held each country accountable for reporting breakthroughs with each other, with great penalty attached if not followed. There is an abundance in the cosmos that humanity can benefit from. With an emphasis on responsible space extraction, humanity is primed to set itself up for a future of great surplus. From resources to data to tourism, the potential for space is a door that hides a cave of wonders. Space tourism and colonization supply chains. There is little to say on the great anticipation of humanity being multiplanetary. With this colonization comes its own development of systems that will naturally develop. Even with its origins on Earth, new ideas and cultures will naturally develop over generations of living in their new environment. Still, a relationship with the mother planet will be essential for its growth, and an entire industry of efficient, reliable, and cost-effective supply chain of goods and services will become interstellar. Personnel reinforcements, Food and water reserves, medicine, and logistical support are just a few sectors required for the development of off-world civilizations. Space R&D, which I discuss later in this chapter, would be dedicated to all space-related human endeavors to allow us to thrive, not succumb, in the cosmic starbed of eternity. UAP technologies could be the key to spearheading the space supply chain with high-speed, zero-fuel, AI-driven vehicles designed to specification. These new development sites will quickly showcase the main concerns: infrastructure concerns, a self-sufficient source of water and food, efficient workload that is more forgiving on the wear and tear of the human body, fast interplanetary communication channels, hospital and medical infrastructure, radiation concerns. These are just a sliver of things to consider on matters of self-sufficiency. Driving costs lower and a strong ability to replicate settlements without full reliance on colonization efforts from the mother planet should be the end goal of the first phase of space colonization. IDI outposts would be essential for nearly any and all space-related human endeavors. Space tourism will be limited in its infancy. Transorbital travel across the Earth will be a limited but lucrative sector in space tourism, as well as a booming, once-in-a-lifetime space bus to get a better glimpse of the cosmos. Space tourism across IDI outposts and even entirely new planets will be another thing entirely. Jet lag would be the understatement of the universe. Space R&D, the seedbed of UAP technological development. In what I would argue is perhaps the most important facet of this subchapter, there is no more important sector to focus on than space R&D. While it is important to acknowledge and recognize the incredible inventions of companies such as Lockheed, the funding and manpower is simply far too limited in comparison to what an IDI can accomplish. Thousands, if not tens of thousands of engineers, a wider scale of testing, far more resources, and with the funding of nations that would put any black budget to shame. What better place to develop and utilize UAP technologies than the very place that spawned interest into UAP to begin with? If the UAPDA legislation is anything to go by, then the first and primary industry to explore with these technologies is travel. I would further segment this into AI, a new era of drone technologies, and self-replication. AI for logistical support and systemized travel, new materials designed for long-haul space travel, and the ability to replicate and build in space to the specifications of the mission at hand. I speculate that the first phase for any IDI would be how to systemize technological branches in order to streamline costs and output in a predictable and scalable model. While it is impossible to send people in craft going Mach 40, intelligently designed craft transferring goods and materials would bridge the gap from the mother planet to the cosmic front. High-capacity radar seeking out specific resources would be an excellent way to map tracking points for drones to scope out extraction points and ideal locations to build IDI outposts. Craft that can move at such speeds would be able to survey our own solar system with ease. Such craft could be used to inspect natural phenomena like hurricanes and tornadoes, or even equipped with technologies that could fully destroy such disasters from ever forming into a dangerous state. I leave such ideas to greater minds than I, but I firmly believe that space vehicle development and testing would be a powerful industry the likes the world has ever seen. An interplanetary defense initiative must take the lead in technological development for the betterment of humankind. An incentive to attract our planet's best and brightest with adequate funding and testing under a unified doctrine, as opposed to divided, higher cost, and less efficient R&D for rewards that only benefit a few. The concept of mutually assured destruction should be transmuted to mutually assured benefit when discussing UAPs and their potential. I believe this will be the single most important function of an IDI for long-term growth of humanity as we become more accustomed to the cosmic forest. The asteroid mining sector. Sustainable resource procurement is a topic of concern in our time. Within the great abundance, humanity has the opportunity to invest in developing off-world mining operations. Coupled with highly specialized high-speed transport craft, the cosmic horizon suddenly dawns onto new industry, allowing the mother planet to replenish and preserve her reserves. In 2012, the first tangible efforts to facilitate asteroid mining exploration and development emerged, with Planetary Resources, a Seattle-based aerospace company, leading the way. Deep Space Industries quickly followed suit. Both companies have made substantial contributions to the field, focusing on satellite designs that have successfully identified approximately 15,000 asteroids with significant mining potential. However, the realization of asteroid mining remains largely hypothetical, primarily due to its exorbitant cost. While precise estimates of commercial mining expenses remain unclear, parallels can be drawn between such endeavors and NASA's OSIRIS-REx mission, designed to collect samples from the near-Earth asteroid named Bennu. This mission, despite aiming to retrieve only 400 grams to 1 kilogram of material, is projected to span 7 years and incur costs exceeding $1 billion US. Planetary resources and deep space industries face challenges in securing the necessary funding to support such high development costs, ultimately leading to their acquisition by other companies in 2018 and 2019, respectively. Notwithstanding the steep financial investment required, the pursuit of asteroid mining technology may prove to be a worthwhile venture due to the immense value that asteroids hold. AsteRank, an assessment tool for over several thousand asteroids tracked by NASA, has calculated that mining just the top 10 most cost-effective asteroids, those closest to Earth and of the highest value, could yield a profit of approximately 1.5 trillion US. Furthermore, the potential for expansion is substantial. The asteroid 16 Psyche, for instance, is believed to contain a staggering 700 quintillion US worth of gold, a quantity sufficient for every individual on Earth to receive approximately 93 billion US. The utilization of such technology could yield tangible environmental benefits. Primarily, asteroid mining has the potential to obviate the necessity for conventional terrestrial mining practices, which are known for releasing harmful substances like lead and arsenic into water bodies and exacerbating the issue of acid mine drainage. Additionally, asteroid mining offers the prospect of developing solar power satellites, which could serve as a potentially continuous source of clean and renewable energy. Operations like artisanal and small-scale mining, ASM, which are not overseen by larger mining corporations, would be particularly affected by the shift. A case in point is the recent attention focused on the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which contains approximately 70% of the world's cobalt resources. While mining operations can be hazardous in themselves, the alarming prevalence of child labor and fatal accidents within Congolese ASM operations underscores the urgent need for substantial change. Asteroid mining, as an alternative to conventional mining practices, could potentially bring about the transformative change necessary to eradicate such abuses of power around the world. The impact of asteroid mining on the global economy is particularly evident, so much so that speculation of the world's first trillionaire may emerge from the ranks of asteroid mining magnates. The space economy would heavily rely on the rich abundance of minerals out in the cosmos. IDI outposts in several parts of the solar system alone would be enough to bring in enough wealth to not just fund the IDI space projects, but to bring in wealth to the economies of the Earth. It should be of note that asteroid mining could rapidly disrupt the global raw materials economy. These experts argue that the quintillions of dollars worth of materials potentially extracted from asteroids could swiftly overshadow the existing raw materials market. Much like smart disclosure was discussed, smart disruption would be required in order to embrace such a world-changing industry. The influx of resources from asteroid mining could inundate the market, triggering a swift devaluation of global raw materials. But it should be worth noting that keeping the costs of raw materials low may better serve humanity in the long run. I leave that question to the economists reading this. Researchers at Tel Aviv University conducted simulations that support this notion. In their simulations, the arrival of a single shipment of space minerals led to a 50% depreciation in the price of gold on Earth. These findings suggest that the advent of asteroid mining could precipitate a significant and potentially tumultuous global struggle for resources and power, in a world reshaped by the impact of extraterrestrial resource influx. They also envisioned that in the midst of this struggle, developing countries would face significant challenges. These nations heavily rely on mineral exports and lack the resources to establish their asteroid mining ventures. This perspective, though somewhat overlooked in existing literature on space mining economics, is a very real issue. The idea of war and geopolitical history points to this inferred reality if an IDI is not prepared to handle fierce battles over space technologies for their nations. These materials would have to be paid in some way to the nations of the Earth through subsidies, while the IDI utilizes the resources to mass-produce fleets, create extraplanetary infrastructure, hold on to reserves for economic emergencies, or even sell to nations and contractors at a fixed price point. They could also use the funds from the asteroid mining sector as a way to pay for UBI for all nations affected by the disruption. A new world of abundance would open. Some nations may consider utilizing this abundance to try to get an edge over a competitor, but the IDI would need to be responsible in enforcing the treaties required. Threat of cutoff or severe sanctions from such resources would be incredibly foolish for any respectable nation to face. The advent of asteroid mining might empower a single company to monopolize the trade of a particular natural resource, posing a threat to countries that currently depend on resource exports. For instance, certain individual asteroids contain upwards of 50 billion US dollars worth of platinum. In comparison, South Africa, the world's largest platinum producer, accounted for about 72% of global supply, mining approximately 3.8 billion US dollars worth of platinum in 2018, equivalent to 4.3 million ounces at an average price of $882.18 per ounce. South Africa has greatly benefited from its platinum and mineral resources, with the industry employing over 451,000 people and contributing 8.2% to its GDP. In a future dominated by asteroid mining, South Africa's economic prosperity would wane, adversely affecting the livelihoods of many of its citizens. While the individuals presently engaged in precarious mining conditions might experience improved safety, they would also find themselves unemployed. More significantly, those losing their jobs, particularly low-income workers lacking the necessary skills for asteroid mining, would be unable to secure employment in the asteroid mining sector. Consequently, there would be a lasting loss of vital, low-skilled jobs for individuals in dire need of income. An IDI spearheading the asteroid mining sector may consider utilizing the funds from the resource extraction as means of paying for UBI for displaced workers, but the conversation will inevitably turn to considering enough surplus for UBI for all of humanity. Intelligence and data centers. If there is one resource that is highly sought after, it's data. Data of all sorts can be relocated and manned off-world, while utilizing a vast array of satellites to collect data on things such as climate and weather, monitoring airspace over oceans for illicit activity, and collecting interstellar data in all the same ways NASA would. The potential for data collecting is endless. There is an argument to be had by moving data centers into outer space. Data centers operating on solar energy would be far more efficient with greater energy output by engaging solar energy in full. This would significantly offset the usage of the mother planet's resources and bring the data sector into a new frontier. Data collection is an essential part of the modern world, and it will surely follow the first colonizers of the first off-world settlement. According to a report by City GPS, the cost of launching payloads into orbit could reach as little as $33 per kilogram by 2040. With a constant energy source, operational costs would reduce over time and significantly offset the rising electricity costs on Earth. Furthermore, a large amount of energy goes towards cooling data centers. Space's natural cooling would allow for heat dissipation through radiation, but radiators could be developed to maximize this effect. The International Space Station dumps heat as infrared light through thin metal cooling plates. In the vacuum of space, light travels at a swifter pace than it does through the existing fiber optic cables that carry our data. It's worth noting that the universal speed limit is essentially the speed of light when measured in a vacuum. This faster light transmission could result in quicker data transfer times between space-based data centers and their users on Earth. Furthermore, data transmitted through space potentially enjoys enhanced security. Attempting to interfere with or intercept satellite-transmitted data is notably more complex than accessing terrestrial data lines, providing an additional layer of protection. Moreover, intercepting laser-based point-to-point communication between orbiting data centers would present an even greater challenge. Space-based data centers could also reduce latency through networked satellites that aid in edge computing, a more real solution in a more interconnected world. LEO may be an excellent place to start, but the litter that riddles such real estate must be handled first, though there are already talks of putting data centers on the moon. The potential for the interstellar economy is greater than anything humanity has ever witnessed. With unified goals and a desire to prosper as a species, humanity can see great abundance in its future. But we must take heed of our past, the conflicts that brought us to where we are now, address them, and mitigate them so we can move forward together for a better future. Final words. UAP technologies have the potential to jumpstart humanity into an exciting and disruptive future. Furthermore, the potential for NHI existing can put into perspective the fundamental truth of our place in the universe. We are one species among other species within the dark forest. As of writing this paper, the House and Senate of the United States are debating terminology within the UAPDA legislation. I believe disclosure is only possible once we accept the implications of where this ontology may lead, the legal and geopolitical complexities of such technologies, and the exciting future of what a unified force under an interplanetary defense initiative may look like. For we may one day need to march under the banner of Earth, not to wage war against aliens, but to conquer the past so we may hyperdrive into the light that brightens the dark forest, the human spirit.